It started, as most of life's profound humiliations did, with a wish made on a Tuesday. Luna Wren, palace gardener and omega of negligible social standing, was on her knees in the royal rose garden, wrestling with a particularly stubborn patch of bindweed. She'd been at it for 3 hours, and the bindweed was winning. The moon, fat and silver, hung directly over the Whispering Falls, and the old pack story claimed that any wish whispered on such a night would be carried by the spray straight to the ears of the moon goddess. Luna didn't believe it, not really. She'd grown up on that story the way every pup in the Thornfeld pack had, told around fires, whispered by grandmothers, invoked by teenagers who wanted better marks on their shifting exams. The goddess, the story went, only answered wishes that were already true. She didn't grant fantasies, she just gave the truth a push. Luna didn't believe that either. Her back ached, her hands were stained with dirt, and 5 minutes ago she'd held the garden gate open for Lady Pemberton, who had walked through it as if the gate had opened itself. No nod, no glance. Not even the vague, unfocused acknowledgement you'd give a piece of furniture that happened to be in your path. This was not new. This was every day. The wolf in her, who had opinions about everything and shared them with the dry enthusiasm of someone narrating a mildly disappointing documentary, observed. He's done that 412 times, give or take. I stopped counting because it was depressing us both. Luna ignored her. She was good at that. Now, from somewhere beyond the hedgerow, she heard voices, low, masculine, accompanied by the crunch of gravel under expensive boots. King Orrin Blackmere and his council, returning from the evening session, his laughter, a deep, rolling sound that did something unfortunate to the hydrangeas and something worse to Luna's pulse, drifted across the garden. He didn't look her way. He never did. Something stirred in her chest. A quiet nudge, persistent and unwelcome. His scent is on the breeze again. Pine and ozone. You noticed. Again. Luna yanked a fistful of bindweed from the soil and told herself it was the evening air. Nearby, 2 kitchen maids were lingering by the fountain, voices pitched in the conspiratorial register that meant gossip of the highest order. Did you hear? Alder Thorne from the Creek Hollow pack found his mate. Right there at the summer market. Looked at her and just knew. Imagine, the other sighed. Just imagine. Luna rolled her eyes. Your heart rate just spiked. I'm noting that for the record. It doesn't happen to people like us, Luna muttered under her breath, and she wasn't sure if she was talking to the maids, her wolf, or the bindweed. Interesting use of us. You usually pretend I'm not here. The maids drifted back toward the kitchens, their gossip fading into the evening. The garden emptied. Luna was alone with the bindweed and the moon and the sound of falling water. The moon hung fat and close. The falls roared. Mist drifted across the garden like something alive. And Luna, in a moment of profound, weed-fueled exhaustion, looked up at the silver disk, felt the cool spray on her cheeks, and whispered it. I just wish he'd see me. Just once. She blinked. She'd said he. Not someone, not anyone. He. She hadn't meant to say he. Yes, you did. It was a silly, flimsy wish, born of the same part of her that occasionally bought lottery tickets. She expected nothing. She went back to the bindweed, yanked it free with a grunt of satisfaction, and forgot all about it. The wolf inside her did not forget. Finally, she said, and for once she sounded hopeful. The moon goddess, apparently, was listening. The next morning, King Orrin Blackmere was in the middle of a strategic meeting regarding a territorial dispute with the Silver Creek pack. His beta, Torvin Blackwood, a man whose soul had been aged into fine leather by years of service to the crown, was pointing at a map with the grim determination of a man who had been pointing at this same map for 3 consecutive meetings. My king, if we cede the Eastern Ridge, we lose our primary watch point. The Silver Creek delegation arrives in 6 days, and their ambassador has already— Orrin wasn't listening. A breeze had drifted through the open arched window. It carried a scent. Earth. Sweet pea. Sun-warm skin, something green and alive and specific, in a way that made his lungs forget how to function. The wolf inside him, a being whose romantic instincts were filtered entirely through the behavioral repertoire of an actual wolf, and who had never, in his entire existence, witnessed a successful courtship that didn't involve either a dead rabbit or prolonged staring, went absolutely nuclear. Her! It's her! The one who tends the dirt! Bring her a rock! A large one! Oren's head turned to the left, towards the grand arched window that overlooked the royal rose garden. And there she was, the gardener, Luna. Her hair was a mess of brown curls escaping a haphazard bun, and she had a smear of mud on her cheek. She was currently engaged in a staring contest with a squirrel that had stolen a begonia bulb. The squirrel was winning. Territory dispute. The squirrel has claimed her territory. We should intervene. Oren tried to turn his head back to the map. It wouldn't move. He strained his neck muscles, commanding them, threatening them, bargaining with them. They refused. His eyes remained locked on the gardener, who had just surrendered the begonia and was now shaking her fist at the victorious squirrel. The wolf watched this display with the reverence of a pilgrim witnessing a miracle. She conceded the bulb. A tactical retreat. Very wise. I will compose a ballad. My king? Torvin's voice was laced with a delicate, practiced concern. The map, Oren gritted out, his neck veins standing at attention, is over there. I am aware. And yet your head is over here, sire, facing the window. Perhaps, Oren said, we could move the meeting to the window. The light is better over there. For the map. The light was, in fact, perfectly fine where they were, but the council members, loyal and deeply confused, began gathering the heavy parchment and moving the entire strategic meeting to the window, arranging themselves in a clumsy semicircle around their king, who was still aimed at the garden with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. Luna, oblivious, chose that exact moment to trip over a watering can, landing face first in a bed of pansies. A small, undignified poof of petals and soil erupted around her. She touched a flower. We also touch flowers. We have so much in common. Oren closed his eyes. It didn't work. Even with his eyes closed, he could feel his head pulling, straining to face her. It was a nightmare. A floral, dirt-smudged, squirrel-adjacent nightmare. Luna felt it first as a prickle on the back of her neck, the kind of feeling that says, you're being watched. Not the casual, passing glance kind, the kind that feels like someone has bolted a searchlight to your spine and is refusing to turn it off. She straightened up from the pansy bed, spitting out a petal and brushing dirt from her overalls. She scanned the castle walls. Nothing. Probably just a guard, bored on his watch. The wolf in her disagreed. It's not a guard. Luna went back to work, deadheading the lavender, trying to ignore the persistent itch between her shoulder blades. But it didn't go away. It intensified. Something happened, last night. The wish. Nothing happened, Luna muttered, snipping a dead stem. I wished on a waterfall like a child, and now I'm talking to myself in a garden. Peak dignity. Your hands are shaking. They were. Luna shoved them in her pockets. She risked another look. This time she saw it. In the high window of the council chamber, a distinct shape. King Oren. And he was staring directly at her. Luna's blood ran cold, then hot with mortification. What had she done? Was her pruning technique offensive? Was there a rule against arguing with squirrels on royal property? She ducked behind a large rhododendron, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was her defense mechanism, honed over a lifetime. When in doubt, disappear. She peered through the leaves. The king was still there, and his head had tracked her movement. He was now staring intently at the rhododendron. He tracked you through a bush. That's either predatory or devoted. Possibly both. Inside the council chamber, chaos reigned. So, as you can see, the Silver Creek pack is fortifying this position, Torvin said, his finger jabbing at the map now pinned precariously to the wall beside the window. My king, your thoughts? Oren's thoughts were as follows. She is hiding. Why is she hiding? Is the bush a threat? Aloud, Oren said, The bush. It's very green. Torvin blinked twice and chose, wisely, not to respond. Indeed, sire. A pause. About the impending border dispute? Oren felt a muscle in his jaw twitch. Torvin, he said, his voice dangerously low. Cancel my afternoon appointments. Torvin blinked. All of them, sire? You have the trade delegation from the Sunstone Pack and the quarterly budget review. Cancel them. I have an urgent matter of state to attend to. A botanical crisis. He strode from the room, his body moving forward while his head remained swiveled unnervingly to the left, giving him the appearance of a man attempting a very complicated and unsuccessful dance move. He walked directly into the doorframe. The resulting thud echoed through the silent council chamber. Torvin sighed, a long, weary sound, and pinched the bridge of his nose. He had served the old king. He had survived a border war, a famine, and a council coup. None of that had prepared him for today. Luna stayed hidden for a solid 10 minutes. This was absurd. She was a gardener, not a fugitive. She had work to do. Taking a deep breath, she decided to brave it. She stepped out from behind the bush and marched purposefully toward the compost heap, wheelbarrow in tow. She would not look at the window. She would not. You're marching. You never march. You usually shuffle and hope nobody notices. I'm being professional, Luna hissed. You're panic marching. There's a difference. She loaded the barrow with weeds and clippings, her movements stiff and unnatural. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. It was him, the king. He was walking across the grand lawn, flanked by 2 royal guards who looked deeply uncomfortable. And he was looking at her. His body walked a straight line toward the training grounds, while his attention pulled permanently sideways, the most bizarre, terrifying, and frankly impressive display of neck control she had ever witnessed. He passed a sundial, missing it by inches. He navigated a stone bench with the eerie precision of a guided missile. The wolf in him had apparently switched to tactical navigation, obstacle avoidance without ever breaking line of sight. Luna found herself holding her breath. This couldn't be happening. She was Luna Wren. People didn't look at her, let alone stare as if she were the single most interesting thing in a world that contained, among other things, actual dragons in the northern mountains. He smells like pine and ozone, even from here. Your body is responding. My body is panicking. Those are remarkably similar, biologically speaking. She reached the greenhouses, her sanctuary, and practically dove inside, slamming the door behind her. She leaned against it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The greenhouse was warm and humid, smelling of damp earth and growing things. It was safe. She waited a moment, then crept to a pane of glass and peered out. The king had stopped in the middle of the lawn. The guards had stopped with him, and he was standing there, motionless, facing the greenhouse door. Luna watched from behind the glass. He's just standing there, in the middle of the lawn. His guards look like they want the ground to swallow them. Luna slid down the glass and sat on the floor. This is because of the wish. I know. You asked to be seen. You didn't specify the terms. I'm aware. The terms are not great. The next few days were a masterclass in escalating absurdity. Oren tried to rule a kingdom while his gaze was permanently claimed by a gardener. He held audiences with foreign dignitaries while angled awkwardly in his throne. He inspected the new recruits for the pack guard, with his head craned so far back toward the distant herb garden that he nearly fell over. The wolf provided a running commentary of courtship suggestions, each one filtered through the behavioral logic of a creature whose entire understanding of romance was bring gifts, stare, sit very still near the object of affection. She picked up a spade. Excellent tool selection. Bring her a better spade. And then, more quietly, with an odd tenderness that caught Oren off guard, that patch of clover near the east wall. It is lush. She would grow things there. Oren found himself carrying a smooth river stone in his pocket for no reason he could articulate. He'd picked it up from the garden path 3 days ago. It was gray, flat, and unremarkable. The wolf was disproportionately invested in it. Excellent rock. She will be very impressed. Present it, with dignity. His dignity was in tatters. His neck ached from 7 different wrong angles. Torvin had moved past exhaustion into a new emotional state that didn't have a name, somewhere between resigned acceptance and the quiet, faraway look of a man mentally composing his letter of resignation. The botanical crisis excuse had not, Torvin informed him stiffly, been believed by anyone. The council is talking, Torvin said. The staff is talking. Everyone is talking. The general consensus ranges from a debilitating neck spasm to a new form of royal meditation. No one has guessed the truth, because the truth is insane. Oren said nothing. He was watching Luna chase a butterfly away from a newly planted bed of snapdragons. She defended the snapdragons. Our future queen is a tactician. But it was worse than gossip. The pack's rumor network, a force more potent than any standing army, more efficient than any postal service, had moved past curiosity and into suspicion. A nobody Omega gardener had the king's total, unblinking attention. The staff didn't think it was romantic. They thought it was witchcraft. It started in the kitchens. The cooks, who trafficked in gossip the way other people trafficked in currency, began constructing theories. She used herbs. She had old magic. She'd slipped something into the king's food. No one asked how a gardener who ate in the staff hall and had never been within 50 feet of the royal kitchens would accomplish this, because logic was not the rumor network's primary tool. Luna felt it before she understood it. Coworkers who used to ignore her now actively avoided her. Conversations stopped when she entered the potting shed. The assistant groundskeeper, who had shared her lunch table for a year, moved to a different bench without explanation. Then came the practical consequences. The head housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Aldrich, whose administrative efficiency was matched only by her capacity for silent judgment, reassigned Luna to the farthest, most desolate corner of the palace grounds. The reasoning given was operational rebalancing. The actual reason was written in the way Mrs. Aldrich refused to meet her eyes. The kitchen staff served her last. Then they served her grudgingly. Then they stopped serving her altogether. And she had to rely on Cora, her friend from the bakery, to smuggle bread rolls out in her apron. They're afraid of you. That's new. The wolf considered this with her usual detachment. They think I'm a witch. You're a gardener who made a stupid wish. There's a difference, but I can see how the distinction is lost on them. For Luna, the constant watching was a waking nightmare. She tried everything. She worked at night, but his chambers had a perfect view of the moonlit gardens, and she would see his silhouette in the window, pointed in her direction. She tried the farthest, most obscure corners of the palace grounds, only to have the king suddenly decide that this forgotten patch of weeds required his immediate and sustained royal attention. The wolf in Oren's head treated these expeditions as migration tracking. She has migrated. We must follow. This is natural. Her friend Cora, a baker's assistant with a mind full of romantic nonsense and bad advice, and a heart too loyal to abandon Luna when everyone else had, was ecstatic. "He's courting you," she'd squealed, dusting flour from her apron. They were in the kitchens, where Cora had pulled Luna through the back entrance to avoid the hostile stares of the cooking staff. "It's a grand, silent gesture. It's poetic." "He looks like a man whose head is stuck. Luna had muttered, stress kneading a lump of dough. He walked into a fountain yesterday, Cora. A fountain, submerged to the waist. He just stood there, dripping, and staring at me while I repotted the geraniums. There is nothing poetic about that. It shows devotion, Cora insisted. I was covered in potting soil and smelled faintly of fish emulsion. If that's what overcomes him, the man has problems. The truth was, it was starting to do strange things to her. After a lifetime of being scenery, being seen so completely was terrifying. But underneath the terror, a tiny, treacherous seed of something else was starting to sprout. The first time he'd smiled, a small, tired, helpless smile, as she'd successfully untangled a string of fairy lights from a trellis. Her stomach had done a complicated flip. She had immediately dropped the lights. And from somewhere in Luna, barely a whisper, his pupils just dilated. I'm not saying anything, I'm just observing. Stop observing, Luna had whispered. I've been observing him for 11 months. You've been ignoring me for 11 months. We're both very committed to our respective positions. On the fourth day, Oren cornered her. He'd waited until she was alone in the orchard, harvesting apples. His approach was heralded by the frantic rustling of his guards, trying to keep up with a man who was walking forward while looking sideways. He stopped 10 feet away. Gardener, he said. His voice was rough. Luna froze, halfway up a ladder, an apple in each hand. Your Majesty? She squeaked, trying to look anywhere but at him, which was difficult when he was projecting a force of will equivalent to a small star. We need to talk. The wolf in him had been building toward this moment for 4 days. Closer. Smell her hair. It smells like apples, and sun, and the future. Shut up, Oren muttered under his breath. I beg your pardon, sire? Luna stammered, thinking he was talking to her. Not you, he said, waving a frustrated hand. It's complicated. Look, this situation. He gestured vaguely at his own head. It's not intentional. Luna's anxious rambling kicked into high gear. Oh, I know. I mean, of course not. Why would it be? It's probably a draft, or a curse, or maybe you slept on it wrong. These things happen. My grandmother once slept on a hairpin and could only look at the ceiling for 3 days. It was very inconvenient for conversation. Not that I'm saying you're like my grandmother. You're a king, obviously. A very not grandmotherly king. She trailed off, horrified at her own verbal avalanche. Oren was just looking at her. And for the first time, she saw past the unnerving intensity. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the deep, profound confusion. The man wasn't a predator, he was a prisoner in his own body. The wolf in her went soft. He's telling the truth. Can you smell it? He's terrified. A flicker of empathy pierced through her panic. Are you all right, Your Majesty? She asked, her voice soft. His expression softened, the hard lines of his jaw relaxed. No, he said, and the honesty of it hung in the air between them. Not really. Before either of them could say anything else, a branch above Luna, overloaded with apples, chose that moment to crack. Apples rained down around them. One bounced squarely off the top of the king's head. He didn't even flinch. He just kept looking at her, an apple rolling to a stop at his feet, as if the universe pelting him with fruit was a perfectly normal Tuesday. And Luna, despite everything, despite the terror and the mortification and the sheer weirdness of it all, felt a laugh bubble up inside her. It escaped as a startled snort, which only made it funnier. She clapped a hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Oren watched her, a slow, bewildered smile spreading across his face. The wolf in him went quiet. Not the scheming quiet, or the loud quiet. Something gentler. That sound. We must hear it again. And from somewhere in Luna, his laugh lines. He has laugh lines. She noticed. The apple incident was a turning point, but so was what came next. Torvin appeared in Oren's study that evening with a document. He placed it on the desk, positioning it carefully in the direction Oren's head was currently aimed. A formal complaint, sire, from the senior palace staff. 20 signatures. They are requesting an official investigation into Luna Wren for, and I quote, unnatural influence on the crown. Oren's jaw tightened. He tried to scan the names. This was difficult, as the document was directly in front of him, and his head was aimed approximately 40 degrees to the left, toward the garden. He was reading the complaint at an angle that would have given a typesetter a stroke.
This is absurd, Oren said. She hasn't done anything.
I know that, sire, but your behavior is, and I say this with the deepest respect and loyalty, completely insane. You cannot credibly dismiss a formal complaint when you are, at this very moment, reading it at a 40-degree angle because your head won't cooperate. Oren had no response to that, because Torvin was right. I'll stall it, Torvin said, but I can't stall it forever. And sire, the Silver Creek delegation arrived this morning. I've been handling the negotiations myself. Their ambassador asked why the king wasn't present. I told him you were indisposed. He asked with what? I said it was a botanical matter. He thinks we're at war with a plant. That night, Oren sat in his study, staring out the window at the darkened garden. The wolf, apparently unbothered by the political crisis, had moved on to cataloging Luna's greenhouse from memory. She has 43 pots on the south shelf. 7 are empty. We should provide seedlings. Our kingdom is under internal threat, Oren said to the empty room. The seedlings are also under threat. Priorities. The rock was still in his pocket. He had tried to leave it on his desk 3 times. Each time his hand had put it back. He was losing an argument with a piece of river stone, and the river stone was winning. Luna learned about the investigation from Cora. Cora arrived at the greenhouse with red eyes and a basket of bread rolls she'd hidden under a cloth. One of the rolls had a thumbprint in it where she'd gripped it too hard. Cora stress-baked the way other people stress-smoked, and the evidence was all over her apron. 20 signatures, Cora said, her voice thick, including Mrs. Aldrich. And Garrett from the stables, he used to give you extra straw for the mulching. Garrett? Luna's voice was flat. Garrett, who I helped deliver a foal at 3 in the morning last winter? That Garrett? He signed in pencil, if that helps, like he wasn't fully committed. It did not help. Luna sat down on an upturned pot. Something inside her went very still and very cold. The only thing she had ever possessed, not rank, not title, not status, was her place. The garden, the greenhouse, the routines, the quiet dignity of being reliable, of being needed even if she was never noticed. That was being taken from her. You want to run. The wolf's voice was gentle now, no edge. I could leave, she said. Resign. Go somewhere no one knows me. Cora grabbed her hand. Don't you dare. We've been running since we were 12. Where has it gotten us? The apple incident had unlocked something in Oren. Not a solution, but an admission that one was needed. Torvin, at the end of his considerable rope, agreed. There is only one person in this kingdom who deals with inexplicable magical maladies, sire. No, Oren said immediately. Absolutely not. Old Mad Elsbeth lives by the Whispering Falls. They say she can hear the moon goddess's replies. They also say she turns people she dislikes into newts. She has a very large newt collection, sire. Torvin's face was grim. It's a risk we have to take. Your Majesty, with all due respect, you tried to sign a trade agreement on the back of a pastry chef today because he was standing next to the gardener. This cannot continue. Oren sighed in defeat. Finding Luna and convincing her to accompany them was another matter. She had become an expert at evasion. They eventually located her in the highest turret of the old western tower, where she was ostensibly dusting off some forgotten potted ferns. I'm very busy, she said, her voice tight with panic as Oren and Torvin appeared in the doorway. Oren couldn't get his entire body into the room, as his head was trying to maintain a line of sight with her, forcing him to stand sideways in the hall. "Gardener, Luna, please," he said, his voice strained. "We think we know how to fix this, but we need you." He said please. A king said please to a gardener. "Go." The nudge was quiet, certain. "Fine," she sighed, putting down her dusting cloth. "But if I get turned into a newt, I am haunting your petunias for the rest of eternity." Mad Elspeth's hut was a chaotic jumble of moss, river stones, and questionable taxidermy, nestled right beside the thundering curtain of the Whispering Falls. The air was thick with the smell of odd herbs and damp magic. A jar on the windowsill contained something that might have been pickled mushrooms, or might have been eyeballs. Luna decided not to ask. Elspeth herself was a tiny, wrinkled woman with eyes as bright and sharp as a magpie's. She took one look at the trio, the sideways king, the hollow-eyed beta, and the terrified gardener, and cackled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Well, well, well," she rasped, poking Orin in the ribs with a gnarled finger. "Look what the wish dragged in." Luna froze. Orin and Torvin exchanged a look of alarm. "You know about this?" Torvin asked. Elspeth ignored him, circling Luna. "A little wish, wasn't it? Whispered on a full moon, right into the water's ear." Her sharp eyes pinned Luna to the spot. "Just wanted to be seen, eh, little mouse?" Luna's face burned. "It was a stupid wish," she mumbled. "I didn't think it would actually—" "Oh, it didn't do anything," Elspeth cackled, turning to Orin. "Not really." She peered into the king's eyes, which were still fixed on Luna. "You poor fool. You think this is a curse?" Orin gritted his teeth. "I cannot look away from her. If that is not a curse, what is?" "It's a revelation," the old witch declared, tapping him on the nose. "The goddess doesn't grant fantasies, boy. She only answers wishes that are already true. She gives the truth a push." She snapped her fingers. The wish didn't create the connection. It just stripped away the denial, revealed what was already there. She gestured between them. "He was already watching you, girl. Every day. From his window, in the halls, pretending to inspect the stonework when you walked by. The wish just took away his ability to pretend otherwise. It hooked his eyes to his heart." A profound silence descended on the hut, broken only by the roar of the falls and the sudden frantic pounding of two separate hearts. Luna stared at Orin. Not as a king, not as a bizarre headlocked stalker, but as a man who had apparently been hiding a secret so deep, even he hadn't fully acknowledged it. His face was a canvas of shock, denial, and dawning, horrified realization. "Hear that? I told you. First day. The scent. I was right." The wolf inside him was vibrating with vindication. Orin remembered all the times, the stolen glances from the council room window, telling himself he was just appreciating the garden's layout. The way he'd found excuses to walk the southern colonnade because her scent clung to the air there. He'd called it diligence, an appreciation for the palace grounds. He was the king. He was not allowed frivolous feelings for a gardener. His heart, apparently, had staged a coup. Elspeth turned sharp eyes on Luna. "And your wolf's been nudging you for months, hasn't she? That warmth near the south colonnade? The way your hands shake when he walks past?" Luna said nothing. Her silence said everything. From deep inside her chest, very quietly, "I've been very patient." "Now," Elspeth said, settling into a chair that creaked like it had opinions about her weight. "The mechanics. The goddess only answers wishes that align with a truth already in motion. She doesn't grant fantasies, doesn't create bonds, doesn't puppet people. She just takes off the masks." His mask was pretending not to look. The physical compulsion, the head thing, that's the goddess's sense of humor. Bit dramatic, but she's always been theatrical. "So you can't break it?" Torvin asked, his voice faint. "Break what? The truth?" Elspeth snorted. "It's wish magic, tied to feeling. It'll fade on its own. A week from the day it was made. That gives you—" She counted on her gnarled fingers. 2 more days. 2 more days of mandatory honesty. She grinned, a terrifying display of mismatched teeth. Then you'll be free to look away, Your Majesty. The question is, will you want to? She leaned forward, suddenly serious. But hear me, both of you. The wish can't decide your futures. His wolf is besotted, yes, I can hear it from here. He's very loud. And he keeps thinking about a rock. But what the wolf wants and what the man chooses are 2 different things. When the magic fades, you'll both have to decide what's real on your own. No shortcuts, no goddess. Just 2 people figuring out if this is something worth keeping. She then shooed them out of her hut, pressing a small, lumpy biscuit into Luna's hand. For the road, little mouse. You look peaky. Luna stared at the biscuit. It looked suspiciously like it had a feather baked into it. She decided to save it. As a weapon, if necessary. The walk back to the castle was silent. The air between them had changed. It was no longer just awkward and strange, it was charged, humming with the energy of a truth that could no longer be ignored. A truth that had exactly 48 hours left on its magical timer. So, he's been watching you for a year. You've been smelling his pine scent for months. And you're going to pretend this is about a wish. The voice inside her was unbearably calm. Please stop talking. I have never once stopped talking. You just stopped listening. The next 2 days were somehow more excruciating than the first 5. The awkwardness was replaced by a fragile, terrifying tenderness. Knowing he was looking not because of a spell, but because he wanted to, changed the nature of the gaze. It was no longer a violation. It was a confession. And it made Luna's stomach feel like it was full of frantic, fluttering moths. Oren, for his part, was a wreck. The wolf had moved past courtship suggestions and into long-term planning. Build her a greenhouse, a better one, with a throne in it. Greenhouses don't have thrones. Hers will. He tried to have a conversation with her in the library. She'd fled there in hopes the sheer volume of books would form a sufficient shield. He stood in the aisle, staring at her over a copy of Advanced Agricultural Economics, and tried to speak. Luna, he began, his voice hoarse. About what Elspeth said. No need to explain, Your Majesty, Luna said quickly, her face buried in a book about root rot. Temporary magical insanity. Happens to the best of us. I'm sure you'll be back to not staring very soon. But that's the point, he persisted, taking a step closer. I don't think it's insanity. His hand twitched toward his pocket. The wolf surged. Oren's jaw locked against it. A silent, visible argument played across his face, the kind that only made sense if you knew one half of the conversation was being conducted by something with 4 legs and no concept of subtlety. And from somewhere in Luna's awareness, watching the way his jaw was working, his wolf just tried to make him give you something. I think it's supposed to be romantic. Luna bit the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. Meanwhile, the investigation was a noose tightening around Luna's life. Torvin had stalled it, but the staff's hostility was intensifying. Luna found her gardening tools moved from the potting shed, not stolen, just relocated to a different shelf, in a different room, behind a locked door. A passive-aggressive treasure hunt. Her greenhouse, the one space that was hers, was locked with a new padlock, a key she wasn't given. She stood in front of the locked door, her hands at her sides, and felt something inside her crack. Not break, crack. The hairline fracture of a person who has spent their whole life taking up no space, discovering that taking up space comes with teeth. Cora brought her food because the kitchen had quietly stopped serving her. Not officially, not with any declaration, just the slow, grinding erasure of someone the institution had decided was a problem. Cora arrived each evening with increasingly creative smuggling methods. Bread rolls in her apron pockets, soup in a canteen labeled cleaning solution, and once, memorably, an entire roast chicken wrapped in a dishcloth and stuffed down the front of her dress. You look lumpy, Luna had said. I am lumpy with love and poultry, Cora had replied, producing the chicken with the dignity of a woman who had absolutely none left to lose. I found the key, Cora said the following evening, pressing it into Luna's hand. She'd stolen it from Mrs. Aldrich's office. Her hands were shaking, but her jaw was set. They don't get to lock you out of your own greenhouse. Cora, you could lose your position. I make bread, Luna. They'll find another baker. They won't find another you. She paused. Also, Mrs. Aldrich keeps the key in her third drawer, behind a stack of incident reports. She really should vary her hiding spots. She's a good one. Keep her. The wolf in Luna's chest was warm. That night, alone in the greenhouse she'd broken back into, Luna sat among her seedlings and wondered if any wish was worth this. A tomato seedling she planted 3 weeks ago had finally sprouted. It was small and crooked and stubbornly alive. The tomato is leaning. Repot it before it develops a complex. One of us with a crooked spine is enough. Luna almost smiled. Almost. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and watched the moon, thin now, waning, and didn't make any more wishes. Day 7. Torvin appeared at Oren's study door. He had the particular stillness of a man who had passed through exhaustion, through resignation, through the quiet contemplation of alternative careers, and arrived at a flat, professional calm that was somehow more alarming than any amount of panic. I can't stall it any more, sire. The staff complaint has reached the council. They want it addressed formally. Luna has been summoned as a witness. The wolf inside Oren was a snarl, not the playful kind. For the first time, something darker than frustration moved through Oren. A cold alpha fury that made the air in the room feel heavy. But he couldn't rage his way through this, not with his credibility in tatters. Rage would prove their point. When? He asked. This afternoon, the full council. Torvin hesitated. Sire, I need you to not growl at Lord Fenton. I know you want to. I frequently want to. But the man has the institutional memory of the entire palace and the grudge-holding capacity to match. I will not growl at Lord Fenton, Oren said, with the tone of a man who was already planning to growl at Lord Fenton. Cora found Luna in the greenhouse an hour before the session. Don't go, Cora said, gripping Luna's arm. You don't owe them anything. You could just leave. Go to the Creek Hollow territory. My cousin has a farm. You could garden there and nobody would... I could disappear, Luna said quietly. Is that what you mean? Cora's face crumbled. I mean you'd be safe. I've been safe my whole life, Cora. Safe and invisible. And what has it gotten me? A locked greenhouse and 20 people who think I'm a witch because a king looked at me. She took a breath. I'm going. Finally, one word from deep in her chest. At least let me come with you, Cora said. Luna looked at her friend, flower-dusted, red-eyed, brave, and for the first time in days felt something that wasn't fear. Okay, she said. Okay. The council chamber was packed. Every ranking member of the Thornfeld pack was there, their faces grim and uncertain. The air smelled of anxiety and old wood. Torvin stood at the front, the formal complaint unrolled on the table. 20 signatures. Unnatural influence on the crown. Luna entered through the side door, flanked not by guards, but by Cora, who had refused to wait outside, and whose presence radiated a protective fury that belied her flower-dusted apron. They stood near the wall. Luna's hands were fists at her sides. Her chin was up, but her knuckles were white. Oren sat on his throne, his body facing forward, but his attention, as ever, pulled toward the side entrance where Luna stood. The wolf inside him was a low, continuous growl, not the playful kind, the kind that preceded damage. A senior councilman, Lord Fenton, a man whose face seemed designed for expressing formal disappointment, and whose eyebrows had, over the decades, evolved into independent organs of disapproval, stood. He adjusted his spectacles. He cleared his throat. He shuffled his papers. He was a man who believed that procedure was a form of power, and he wielded it like a very slow weapon. Luna Wren, you have been named in a formal complaint. 20 members of the palace staff allege that you have, through magical or herbal means, exercised unnatural influence over the mind of the king. How do you answer? Behind Luna, Cora made a sound that was technically a cough and functionally an opinion. The room held its breath. Luna could feel 20 years of training, be small, be quiet, don't take up space, screaming at her to fold, to mumble an apology, to make herself nothing the way she always had. You can run, we've always been good at that. But the door is behind you. The man who sees you is in front of you. Choose. The wolf's voice was steady. No sarcasm, no edge, just truth. Luna stepped forward. Not a stride, not a dramatic march, just one step and then another, until she was standing in the middle of the chamber, alone, small, and refusing to disappear. I made a wish, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. On the full moon, at the Whispering Falls, I wished to be seen. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Luna kept going. That's it. Not for power, not for influence, not for the king's attention. I wished that someone, anyone, would look at me. The lie was small and necessary. She had said he. She knew she had said he, but she would walk into a bonfire before admitting that in front of Lord Fenton. Because I have spent my entire life in this palace, and I was tired of being no one. She looked at the table, the 20 signatures. She knew the handwriting of at least half of them. I held doors for half the people on that list. None of them remember. Lord Fenton's eyebrows, for the first time in living memory, moved in a direction that was not disapproval. It was brief. He recovered. But it happened, and Torvin saw it. Her voice didn't crack. The wolf held her steady, a warm, solid presence at her center. You're doing it. Keep going. She turned to the council. I didn't do anything to your king. I don't have that kind of power. I'm a gardener. I grow things. That's all I've ever done. She took a breath. But I'm not going to apologize for wanting to exist. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Luna stood there, exposed, honest, and terrified in a way that was entirely different from her usual fear. This wasn't the terror of being noticed. This was the terror of choosing to be. Oren watched her, and the wolf inside him went quiet. Not the excited quiet of plotting courtship, not the loud quiet of restraining a howl, a different quiet, the still, profound silence of something clicking into place. Oh, there she is. And then the spell broke. A small, quiet, internal sensation, like a lock springing open. The pressure that had been there for 7 days vanished. His neck was his own. His head was free. For the first time in a week, Oren could look anywhere he wanted. The council was watching. The complaint was on the table. Luna was standing in the middle of the room, having just stripped herself bare in front of every powerful person in the pack. Looking at her now, when the magic was gone, when there was no spell to blame, would confirm everything. It would cost him. He held her gaze. The wolf said nothing, because for the first time, the wolf and the man agreed completely. Luna saw it. She felt the wish's pressure lift, a subtle shift in the air, a loosening she hadn't known she was carrying. The magic was gone. She could feel its absence like a missing tooth. And he was still looking, deliberately, publicly, in front of his council, not because a spell forced him, because he chose to. Told you. 2 words from deep in her chest, no smugness, just relief. Luna's eyes filled. Oren stood from his throne. The investigation is closed, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who has stopped performing and started meaning. The wish has been explained. The magic is over. My gaze is my own. A beat. He let it land. And I will direct it where I choose. Lord Fenton opened his mouth. Oren turned, his head moving freely, voluntarily, for the first time in a week, and looked at him. It was the focused, deliberate gaze of an alpha king, and it carried the kind of weight that made furniture feel fragile. Fenton closed his mouth. Behind Luna, Cora exhaled. It was the loudest sound in the room. "Does anyone else," Oren said very softly, "wish to discuss where I look?" Nobody did. Several people found the far wall suddenly fascinating. Lord Fenton appeared to be reconsidering a number of his recent life choices. Later, the political dust settled in the way political dust does, slowly, awkwardly, and with a lot of people pretending they hadn't said what they'd said. Luna was in the rose garden, on the bench where she'd made the wish that had undone her life and rebuilt it in a shape she didn't recognize yet. She wasn't crying. She was past crying. She was in the hollow, ringing aftermath of having done the bravest thing she'd ever done, and not yet knowing what it had cost her. Her hands were shaking. The wolf was warm and close and silent, letting her feel it. Oren found her there. He came alone. He'd dismissed the guards with a single word, "Leave," and they had hesitated because their king was politically compromised and walking alone toward the woman at the center of it all. Torvin, who had followed at a distance, caught their eyes and nodded them off. Oren sat beside her, not in front of her, not kneeling, beside, equal. The stone bench was cold and the light was gray and the garden smelled like it always did, like earth and growing things and the particular sweetness of roses that hadn't been pruned yet. "What you did in there," he said. His voice was rough. "Standing up, telling them the truth. You didn't need me for that." "He's right, you didn't." A warm murmur in her chest. "I was terrified," Luna said. "I know. You did it anyway. That's not invisibility, Luna. That's the opposite." "My entire life," Oren said, and his voice was low and rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "I have been taught one thing. Duty. The crown, the pack, the legacy. That is what a king is. There is no room for anything else. No room for self, for wants. And I was good at it. I built walls inside myself so high I couldn't even see over them." He took a breath. "And then I saw you. Not just this week, for months, a year maybe. I'd see you from my window, covered in mud and arguing with squirrels, and something in my chest would ache. It was illogical. It was a distraction from my duty. So I looked away. Every single time, I chose to look away." "That witch," he continued, his voice softer now. "She said the wish took away my ability to pretend. She was right. For 7 days, I didn't have to choose to look away. I just got to look at you. It was terrifying. And it was the most honest week of my life." He turned to face her. His head moved freely, no compulsion, no magic. Just the simple, voluntary act of a man choosing where to direct his attention. "The magic is gone, Luna. I can look anywhere I want." He met her eyes. "And I'm choosing to look at you." In his gaze, she didn't see a gardener or an omega or a background thread. She saw herself, reflected in the eyes of a man who had finally stopped pretending. "I was always looking," he whispered. "I'm just done hiding it." Home. That's the word. Home. The wolf in her chest went still, not with tension, but with the deep, settled calm of something finally arriving where it belonged. Then, he closed the small distance between them and kissed her. It wasn't a king's kiss, demanding and powerful. It was hesitant, questioning, and so full of a year's worth of stolen glances that it made her heart ache with a joy so fierce it felt like pain. When they finally broke apart, the sun had broken through the clouds, bathing the garden in a soft golden light. His eyes were still on her. "You're still staring," she whispered, a watery smile touching her lips. "I know," he said, his own smile mirroring hers. And from somewhere deep in Oren, "We did it. The courtship was successful. I will now compose the ballad." From Luna's wolf, dry as ever. "Please don't. It will be loud and have many verses."
I was afraid of that.
That night, Luna found herself back at the Whispering Falls. The moon was a sliver this time, a shy crescent in the indigo sky. She was no longer a person who wished to be seen, but a person who had chosen to be. There was a difference. The first was a hope. The second was a decision. She looked at the tumbling water, at the moonbeams dancing in the mist, and she smiled. "Let him keep looking," she whispered. The wish felt warm as it left her lips, not frantic and needy like the last one, but calm and certain. Less of a request and more of an affirmation, because she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that it was already granted. "That's the first wish you've ever made that I agreed with." The wolf's voice was warm, settled, done fighting. Luna laughed. It was a good sound. It echoed off the water and disappeared into the night, and if the moon goddess heard it, she probably smiled. 3 months later, the great pack-shedding descended upon the palace. The 3 months between the garden kiss and the shedding had been messy, political, and worth every argument. There had been council sessions where Oren introduced Luna as his partner, and half the room pretended to be fine with it. There had been a deeply awkward dinner with the Silver Creek ambassador, who kept glancing between the king and the gardener, as though expecting one of them to explain the punchline. There had been quiet negotiations, Torvin's diplomacy, and Luna's stubborn refusal to accept any title grander than the one she already had. She was the royal gardener. She sat in on councils when she chose to, offered opinions that were sharper than anyone expected from someone who smelled of mulch, and went back to her roses when she was done. The court didn't entirely know what to do with her. She didn't entirely care. For 1 week, a fine, downy undercoat of wolf fur was liberated from every shifted werewolf, creating what looked like a sudden, localized blizzard. Drifts of gray, black, and brown fur piled up in corners, clung to tapestries, and gave the castle's ancient plumbing system a series of hairball-induced coughing fits. In the royal rose garden, Luna was trying to rake a pile of leaves that was 90% fur. Oren found her there, looking just as disgruntled as she felt, with a noticeable clump of his own dark gray fur stuck to his royal tunic. He joined her, grabbing another rake. "Torvin has suggested we could insulate the North Tower with this," he said, gesturing at a particularly large drift of fur. "He claims it would save on the heating budget." "Cora wants to try spinning it into yarn," Luna replied, leaning on her rake. "She's still going on about it. That and the cake disaster at the mating ceremony." "We agreed never to speak of the cake," Oren said gravely.
Cora didn't agree. Cora will be telling that story when we're all old and gray.
"Grayer," she corrected, plucking a tuft of his fur from the air. Luna touched her neck absently, the place where his mark sat, 3 months healed. A small, deliberate scar that meant everything their world had words for, and several things it didn't. Oren caught the gesture. The wolf in him hummed, a deep, satisfied sound. The mark had come with an unexpected side effect. Their wolves could hear each other now. Not thoughts, just the wolves, bleeding through. It was, Luna had decided, like living with a married couple who had been arguing affectionately for decades. The 20 people who had signed the complaint were not punished. Oren had been clear about that, and Luna had agreed. You don't heal a wound by making new ones. But several had quietly apologized. Awkward, halting apologies, delivered in hallways and over garden fences, the kind that cost people their pride and were worth more for it. Mrs. Aldrich had brought Luna a new key to the greenhouse. Not the stolen one Cora had taken. Mrs. Aldrich had noticed that theft immediately, because Mrs. Aldrich noticed everything, and had chosen to say nothing, which was perhaps the closest thing to an apology the woman was capable of before she was ready for the real one. The new key was cut fresh, on a chain. She'd placed it on Luna's potting bench without a word and left. Cora, for her part, had been appointed official palace baker after the previous head baker retired. She was insufferable about it, in the best possible way. Orrin stopped raking and pulled her close. The wolf in him was quiet now, not the loud quiet of restraint or the plodding quiet of early days, but the particular silence of something that no longer needed to shout to be heard. He looked down at her, his gaze as steady and true as it had been the day he chose her. "I love you, Luna Wren," he said, "even when you smell like compost and are actively trying to weaponize my shed fur." "I love you too, Your Majesty," she laughed, picking a piece of fur out of his hair. "Even when your head is on straight." He smiled, that slow, easy smile that was just for her, and kissed her, right there in the middle of the fur-covered, beautifully chaotic garden. From somewhere in his chest, barely audible now, more warmth than words. "The best Tuesday." And from hers, just as quiet, "It is." It was a long way from a secret wish, but it was, she thought, so much better.